You are back with Self-Help. In this video, we're going to be talking about the cycle of mindfulness and how to know that you are doing it correctly. Like we've said in the other videos, there are so many great resources out there, so we're just touching on a few, tips and tricks that helped us in our journey with mindfulness. Be sure to check out the description below. It's going to have so many great resources for you, and
resources. You said Reese's. I think or something.
It's going to have a ton of Reese's Pieces there for you, so eat up.
I'm there.
It's going to have a ton of great resources for you, and really it comes down to you finding which one clicks the best with you, and to each his own. The first part of the mindfulness cycle is finding an anchor in the present moment. That's a word we used a few videos ago, and really an anchor can be whatever you want it to be. A lot of people choose their breath or their breathing to anchor to. People choose like a meditation track. There are times where people will do mindful walking and they'll just be very mindful of their steps. It can be food, you can do mindful eating, you can do mindful brushing your teeth where the sensation of brushing your teeth is, what your anchor is. It can be anything.
Mine was counting my breaths. That was something that they recommended in the app I was using. And whenever I would get distracted or something would come up, I would kind of just restart. But yeah, the anchor is something good to kind of fall back on as well. Things get out of hand or you get distracted or your phone rings or something kind of brings you out of it. Something good to just kind of restart and bring you back.
You choose an anchor or something that you attend to in the present moment. And then what will always happen, and you kind of touched on this earlier, what will always happen is that you will get lost to distraction because our minds love to go every which way. They like to think about things we got to do. They like to replay arguments we had. They like to think about anything and everything that isn't in the present moment. So because it's inevitable that you'll actually get lost to distraction, the next step then is getting lost to distraction. That's actually part of the mindfulness cycle, is that experience. So after you get lost to distraction, the next thing is to notice where your thoughts went, or even notice that you're out of the present moment or you got distracted. That's another really important part of this mindfulness cycle, is noticing that you were lost to distraction. And then the fourth is to gently bring your attention back to your anchor or back to the present moment. And it's important to use that word gently because I think that's something that you talked about earlier, is you would kind of get angry at yourself for getting lost to distraction, even though that's really part of the cycle. That's an important element, is to gently bring your attention back and not judge yourself or beat up on yourself for getting distracted, because it's expected, but gently bringing yourself back to the present moment.
Yeah, just realize it's part of the plan. It's going to happen. It may have longer and longer intervals between you being alone with your thoughts and actually getting distracted by some kind of fleeting thought. But yeah, I think like what you mentioned, not demonizing yourself or not getting angry at yourself for having these distracting thoughts, just realizing that's what's going to happen and then dealing with it and kind of stepping back from those thoughts. Because there's a difference between being immersed in a thought and then realizing you're having the thought. And oftentimes when I was in this cycle of meditation, I would just get lost in the thought and kind of forget I was even meditating. Oh, yeah. And that's very common. But the difference is you can actually step out of that and say, no, I'm here meditating, I'm mindful, I'm trying to be mindful, not getting angry at yourself for getting out of that cycle, but then realizing it's part of it and then trying to bring yourself back.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, those 4 parts of the cycle are to attend to the present moment or use an anchor for that. And then you get lost to distraction, you notice that you were lost to distraction, and then you gently bring your attention back to the present moment or back to your anchor. And this cycle is really what you work on through mindfulness. And so it's totally normal to have these experiences, and that's mindfulness.
That's mindfulness.
I'm reminded of a course that I took in my PhD program that was actually just mindfulness. The whole semester, the class was called Mindfulness, and all we did and talked about was mindfulness. And my professor had a funny way of reminding us of these points that we've been hitting. It's already slipped out a few times, and he would always say, that's mindfulness. So for example, we'd do an activity or a mindful meditation in class, and he would say, what were your guys' experiences with that? And I remember sometimes people would say, oh, I really didn't get into it, or I didn't like the flow of it, or I found that I got really bored of it. And he would always say, that's mindfulness. And at first I didn't really understand, like, why does he keep saying that? But then he really was hitting an important point, which is just observing that you didn't like the person's voice, or you didn't like the activity, or you found yourself getting distracted more often than usual. That is actually mindfulness. It's that observation, it's that noticing, and that's really the goal.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the whole cycle kind of get larger while you have more time during those intervals before you'll actually get distracted, correct? I mean, that's
Right.
kind of what I experienced is, at first it was almost instantaneous. Right when I was trying to, be mindful, immediately my mind would kind of, it seemed like it realized that something was wrong. So it's like, all right, let's just bombard them with as many thoughts and random concerns and random memories that we can. Like, hey, remember in third grade you did this and you threw up on your classmate? Like, here you go, think about this for the next 5 minutes. And I get lost in that, and it was very weird. So it was like my mind was trying to get me distracted a lot at first. But I realized that as I practiced more, I'd have more moments where I'd be without these, intrusive thoughts. And actually be really, at peace and present at the moment. I would still get distracted, and I'd still have other thoughts come in, but I would have more time before that happened. And I also eventually realized that those intrusive thoughts were part of the experience. They were part of mindfulness. Whereas at first, as I told you, I thought that was something I was doing wrong. Knowing that it's part of the cycle really will help. I wish I knew that when I first started this.
Something you just said is what I hear a lot, where clients will come back to therapy after we've talked about mindfulness, and I say, okay, go home and practice. And they'll come back and they'll say, yeah, I'm not too sure that it's working. And I go, okay, well, what gives you the idea that it's not working? Usually they'll have a bunch of different answers, like, well, I didn't feel really relaxed, or I still had a lot of thoughts, or I still got distracted, or I wasn't able to clear my mind. And sometimes they'll even say, it made me think of how anxious I was. And I'll say, that's mindfulness. Exactly. So, and usually they're like, huh? So it really is just a lot of education that goes into mindfulness to teach you what it actually is and isn't. And so the way that you know that it's working is if you are noticing and observing what is going on.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just being aware of the thoughts that come in. Like if you get angry, instead of dwelling on that, you'll realize right away, I'm getting angry, or I'm getting worried, or I'm getting stressed.
Exactly.
Just realizing that means that it's working in a way. It means that you've kind of acknowledged that you're being present in the moment. You're acknowledging the intrusive thoughts. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's kind of funny because even having this worry of, I don't know if this is working or not, is mindfulness.
Yeah.
Because you're checking in and you're saying, okay, what am I experiencing? This isn't really consistent to what I think it should be. But the fact that you're checking in and you are observing and noticing, that's mindfulness.
I like
it. It really does help, smooth that learning curve over because it's part of the process.
Yeah.
So we talked about the mindfulness cycle and where each of the different parts fit in and how that will help you start out. And then we talked a little bit about how to know when you're doing it right, because a lot of people get worried that they're doing it wrong because they're not getting the results that they think they should.
Yeah.
But really understanding that it's the observation and the noticing, that's mindfulness.
That's mindfulness.
So the list that we've included in the description isn't an exhaustive list by any means. We would love for you guys to comment and tell us what you like to use or what resources you have found helpful in the past in your mindfulness journey. And maybe it'll be something that we'll look at and we'll find that is really helpful for us too. So be sure to comment and tell us what you like to use or what different tips and tricks you have for mindfulness. And we would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.